I call this meeting to order for our EA Directors meeting. And first on the agenda is the acknowledgement. The TNRD acknowledge that we are connected with many First Nations communities across the vast regional district. And today we are located in the Tecumseh-Secwepemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with Tecumseh-Secwepemc and respect the territory and land on which we gather. So that's over and done with. Chair's announcement, we have municipal director from visiting us today. And did you want to, yeah, who's going to do the proper welcome?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. As we have a non-appointed member or non-member of the Electoral Area Directors Committee, we do need to have a resolution to allow for participation of non-appointed members. So I can read out the resolution, and if you guys would like to conduct the vote, that would work. So that the Electoral Area Directors Committee allow for non-appointed board members to participate in committee discussions related to the agenda. Sorry, can we just verbally say who moved and seconded because we didn't use our microphones?
Okay, next on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. All in favor? Motion's carried. And next we have the regular board meeting from April 16th. Need a motion to adopt? Yeah. All in favor? Motion's carried. Chair?
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
The minutes that should have been adopted were from March 25th.
I think, what was that?
The minutes that were to be adopted were from March 25th for the March 25th regular meeting or Electoral Area Directors meeting.
Okay, yeah. Need that adoption? All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. I got the wrong agenda.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah, we're into
6.1.
reports, 6.1. I have to change my screen.
Sure, so the accessory dwelling.
Yeah, it says Alex. So Alex, you're up for our discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll actually be handing it over to my colleague, Bobby Sangara. He's the planner working on this, so he'll walk us through a brief presentation, and then I'll assist with questions through the discussion. So, Bobby.
Good morning. My name is Bobby Sangara, and I'm one of the planners here at TNRD, and I'll be talking to you today about accessory dwelling units. So why are we here and how did we get here? At the Committee of the Whole meeting in December, Linda and I brought forth a proposal to amend zoning bylaw 2400, where changes would allow for most residential parcels that are 1 hectare or 2.5 acres in size to allow for a detached secondary suite. We heard from you, the committee, members from the public through OCP events, public everyday conversations, community feedback, and we are now ready to share with this committee what we've learned and what we've heard. To start off, we've adopted accessory dwelling units as a universal term to refer to all detached dwellings. Staff also developed ADU scenarios where we looked at the relationship between parcel size and an ADU size while keeping in mind infrastructure requirements, the notion of keeping it rural, and public inquiries asking for more housing flexibility. Ultimately, I will finish off with what's next. So what did we consider? A minimum parcel size had to be set. An ADU should be permitted on a parcel without requiring additional reports or studies for a septic or for a well. A 1 hectare, 2.5 acre minimum parcel size was chosen to ensure that there's enough space to have a homestead, accessory building, an ADU, a well, and a septic on the same property. Staff then also considered ADU sizes. In the ALR, for parcels that are 40 hectares or roughly 100 acres or less, an ADU size of 90 square meters or roughly about 1,000 square feet is permitted. For parcels that are 40 hectares or 100 acres and more, an ADU size of 186 or roughly 2,000 square feet are permitted. Staff naturally started with these two sizes, 90 and 186. However, 90 square meters or 1,000 square feet appears too small for a parcel that's 1 hectare or larger, or 2.5 acres or larger. Staff then came up with a new number, 140 square meters or 1,500 square feet. To put that in perspective, a manufactured home, 3-bed, 2-bath, ranges between 1,200 to 1,400 square feet. I don't want to be doing variances every day. Ultimately, a large part of this project is to find a balance between keeping the rural character quaint and serene and providing housing flexibility. For that reason, staff are suggesting a limit of 2 buildings for up to 3 dwellings, regardless of parcel size. That being said, parcels that are 4 hectares or 10 acres and larger may still accommodate temporary dwellings in specific circumstances, provided that all conditions in the TNRD zoning bylaw are met. This table represents our most common scenarios. In scenario B, parcels that are between 1 and 3.99 hectares or 2.5 and 10 acres can have an ADU size of 140 square meters, roughly 1,500 square feet. Parcels 4 hectares or 10 acres and above can have 186, roughly 2,000 square feet. For scenario A, a larger ADU size is introduced at a smaller parcel area, while scenario C and D, ADU size is uncapped at 40 hectares or 100 acres and more. Scenario D also has a more gradual approach where parcel size is varied at each interval, and out of all 4 scenarios listed, scenario B is our preferred outcome. So what's next? Staff's next step is to start consultation with Interior Health and Advisory Planning Commission. As well as once that's complete, the public will then be notified through a public information notice with a discussion paper or a fact sheet shared on TNRD's website, social media, and email distribution list. Following public consultation, a draft bylaw will be brought forward to a regular board meeting for first and second reading. Overall, staff are trying to find a balance. This project reflects the feedback from what we are hearing and what we've heard at various public consultation events. Moving forward, consultation and public input will help shape these bylaw changes, allowing them to both be practical and responsive to the needs of TNRD residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Director Gurney.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple questions to help me understand this. The ALR limitations, were those limitations that are relatively recent, and did we or did the previous board just approve those at the recommendation? Because I think there was these were more restrictive, or there were more restrictive numbers that were recently introduced by the ALR within the last 10 years. Can you answer that?
Thank you, through the chair. So previous to 2019, the ALR regulations had flip-flopped a few times, but just prior to 2019, there was no allowance for a secondary dwelling. They took that away. There was quite an uproar. A lot of agricultural farmers and actually came to Victoria and really pushed to say you do need to allow some kind of secondary housing. So in 2019, the ALR changed the regulations and allowed 90 square meters on lots less than 100 acres, 2,000 square feet on parcels greater than 100 acres. We then took that to change our zoning bylaw so that we'd have alignment with that. And while we were there, and this was the previous board, approved changing the zoning such that the minimum parcel size that we would allow a secondary dwelling on was dropped from 8 hectares, 20 acres, down to 4 hectares, 10 acres. So the board tried to allow this on more properties. What we're suggesting now is to take it even further and to say, how about the properties from 1 hectare, 2.5 acres, to 10 acres? Right now, we're saying you can't have detached at all, even though the ALR would allow you to have a detached one. So we're trying to expand where we're allowing the secondary detached dwelling.
Supplement. So thank you for that. So if the ALR didn't exist, is your table saying that you would have otherwise preferred 186 as the number, but say for the ALR size, you're at 90? Have I got that right?
On our recommended approach, we're actually saying we'll allow higher than what the ALR allows on non-ALR lands. But if somebody owns land in the ALR, that trumps our zoning and they have to go to the smaller size. So we're saying go higher than what the ALR allows, but on ALR lands, people are still bound by the ALR rule. And if ALR changes that, great. If not, we're bound by their rules. But we're exceeding that because we're saying on non-ALR lands, we should go to at least 140 square meters, which is 1,500 square feet.
100. So, Bobby, you had said you want your life to be made easier. So, other than ALR land, which is limited at 90, wouldn't it be easier to be 186 for those other categories? And wouldn't C be the easier? Wouldn't C be, did I read that right? That C would be easier?
Yeah, so out of all those outcomes, I think the real challenge here is to find a balance. Trying to find what is rural and what is housing flexibility in comparison to rural. It's easier just to say, yeah, you might as well not have a gross floor area, but I think the balance here is the key. So yes, it would make my job a lot easier to allow 2,000 everywhere, but I don't think that's what we're hearing from the public. We're not hearing that everybody's looking for a 2,000 square foot home. It's usually in that range of 1,300 square feet or 1,500 square feet for an additional dwelling.
Director Sal?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, in the last 4 years, during this term, has there been any enforcements of rules where, under the current rule, they would be in contravention, and then if we adopted this new guideline or new sizing, then they would be aligning with our bylaws. I'm just wondering how many people we've kind of enforced things on. Alex, I think you understand what I'm getting at. Thank you.
Through the chair, yeah, I can't think, there might have been one where you put a notice on title for a second dwelling that was built and that we couldn't issue a permit for and therefore got the notice on title. It wasn't that many. What we're hearing is people calling our office or coming to our community meetings for the OCPs, especially saying, we'd sure love to have a second dwelling on our house for, name the reason, for the kids to live there, for grandma to live there, or for renters so that they can help afford this rural property. And so those people who may have been inquiring are told you can't do it. So those might have been turned away, but this isn't an enforcement. This isn't to fix enforcement problems per se. We don't have a ton of illegally built second dwellings.
Bobby, how does this work when maybe not a detached house, but what you see, especially up in Knutsford country, these folks that buy up there, first thing they do is they build a barn or a structure. I'll reframe that, a structure. And they want to put living quarters up on the top floor over and above whatever they got down below. Could be a horse barn, it could be a storage area for cars, who knows, because there's various amounts of those in Knutsford and other places. How does that work to accommodate those kind of wants and needs where you've got a structure with something else in it, with living quarters accommodating people at the top? How do we handle like that to make it legal? Because I know there's lots of them out there.
So through the chair, the way we're going to make the definition is that the living area is capped at this size, say is 140 square meters. That doesn't mean the whole building has to be that size. So somebody could have a bigger barn or bigger shed. Perhaps the lower level is for the tractor equipment. And then the suite above can be to this size limit. So it will enable that type of housing. Two caveats. One, you still need a building permit. So there might be people who put one in illegally in the past, say over the barn. The zoning would then enable it, but technically it still doesn't meet code or would have to come in for a permit if they were to want to legalize it. And secondly, on ALR lands, the ALR rules still apply. And ALR has taken a different interpretation. They've said the footprint of the barn can't be bigger than 90. So they're a lot more stringent. So I don't want to copy that approach. But yes, we will have a two-tier system of rules. It'll be the rules for non-ALR and the rules for ALR. But we can't control the ALR portion, but we shouldn't punish those not in the ALR in terms of having consistent regulation.
Go ahead, Director Henry.
So focusing in on your recommendation in A and B, the difference between A and B is 186 square meters on something 2 to 4 hectares. And that's really just under 500 square feet of living space on something that is 2 to 4 hectares. That's the difference. Seems to me that there's plenty of room for that 500 square feet between 2 and 4 hectares, even considering the additional parking, secondary septic fields. I'm thinking that A might be a workable solution, and you're still at the 140 for the smaller parcel size. What would you say to that?
Yeah, through the chair. I mean, that's partly, we didn't mention it, but we're here to take your feedback. So we came back to the EA directors because we know this is going to impact your residents more than the municipalities, because this won't apply to the municipalities. And so if what you're hearing and what you're feeling as EA directors is it's better to allow that larger size on the 2 to 4 hectare, in the one shown in scenario A in the report, we're happy to do that. There isn't really a planning reason not to fight over that extra square footage. The only thing we're cautioning is at many of these meetings that we're going to, the residents have not been telling us let her rip. They've been saying, please be careful with the second dwellings. I moved to a rural neighborhood to have a rural lifestyle. And they look down their 2-acre lots, 5-acre lots, and they look down their street and they go, if everybody has 2 of these houses and renters coming and going, is that the lifestyle we wanted to have here? So that's the balance we're trying to find. But I agree with you, going from 140 to 186, does that change that lifestyle that much? Potentially not. So we can certainly go with scenario A if that's what this committee feels, and I'd be happy to move that forward. The other option is we start a little bit smaller. If we start getting variances because people are interested and we find out there's a problem that 140 isn't enough, we can always amend, and we should be monitoring how these bylaws are working. And if they're not working, change them again and not wait 15 or 20 years to react. So that's an okay approach as well. But if we're hearing that 186 is a better number for 2 to 4 hectares, and staff will take your recommendation and move forward with that.
Go ahead, Director Henry.
So Chair, I guess, we've got lots of people thinking about this. I would support the A if fellow directors support that.
Why don't you put that into a motion and then we can discuss it?
Well, I was just wondering if you wanted to get some sense before I made that effort.
Well, if you put it in a motion, then we can have the discussion around it and we'll find out. That's great.
I make that motion that we adopt A over B to get the discussion
Got a
started.
seconder? Director Allen? So just a question, how is this going to affect the 2 new OCPs that you're working at, or 3 of them? I should say we have 4 going. Is this something that you want to be able to include, or do you add it after?
Through the chair, no. So the OCPs will enable this. So they'll have the policy, and it's already built into the policies that you've given first reading to. It will enable this, and so this bylaw will be in line with the OCPs. And the OCP also has language for parcels less than 1 hectare, especially if you're on a water system. There might be opportunities to have a second dwelling there too, but those should be applied for case by case. So the way we've done it is the OCPs are lining up to be able to implement this.
Great, thank you. Okay, any discussion around the motion? Is that the direction we want to give the staff? I guess I'll call the question on the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, that go on to the next item on the agenda is environmental assessment results.
Just wait for the slide to come up. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will start with this discussion, and then I'll hand it over to Colton, who will cover some of the survey results. But I wanted to give a little bit of a background. We're calling it EAO discussion, which is the Environmental Assessment Office. But this issue is even more broad than that, and it's how do we handle these clean energy or renewable energy referrals that we're getting, and other types of projects that sometimes come through the EAO office and sometimes come through different processes. And I'll get into that in a moment. So in this presentation, I'll give a bit of a summary overview of where we're at, pass over to Colton for us to go over the survey results, and then we'll talk about next steps. So last year, the province adopted the Renewable Energy Projects Streamlined Permitting Act, which is a mouthful, but what I've taken from that is the word streamlined permitting. So what they're trying to do is move these clean energy or renewable energy projects through more quickly. And what we're seeing is that the process has changed. So for example, a clean energy producer in the past would apply to use Crown land. The Crown would send us a referral. There'd be plenty of time to respond to that. We have a clean energy policy that the board has adopted that gave us guidance as staff, so we knew what to do. We knew that in the initial request, we give them our basic response. And then when they're at the permitting stage and they actually have details of how big the project will be in the specific location rather than just test pit or test equipment location, we would then bring that back to the board with a report where you could then make a recommendation. Because the process has changed, that's not working anymore. And it's all over the place. Now it's the proponent reaching out sometimes, depending on the size of the project, how much megawattage they're producing, it might go to the Environmental Assessment Office. If it's wind powered or it's under a certain megawattage, then it goes to the BC Energy Regulator now. So the process is convoluted. And we're needing to have, I suppose in short, we have two things at play. We have advocacy. So we have the question of, is this process right that the province is doing? Does the board want to see changes to that? And then on the policy side, staff need direction as to how we respond to these requests and how that information is shared with the board members so that you're aware that it's happening. Recognizing, however, that we don't have jurisdiction on Crown land. So there are limits to what we can say. Our zoning does not apply to these projects. And it's very similar to how we deal with sand and gravel deposits and approvals. The province approves sand and gravel pits. Our zoning does not apply. Yet the province sends us referrals asking us what we think, and we have 30 days or whatever it is to respond. And again, there, the board has a policy in place that says, staff, if you get these, please reply, and here are the comments. We're concerned about impact to residents. We require a request that the province hold a public hearing if there are neighbors nearby, and we want dust controls in place. So there's a set criteria, and staff know what to do, and we pass that on to the province. Now, the province may ignore that, but at least the board has made that comment each time, and we're seen as fighting and pushing for our residents. But again, we don't have the ultimate say. So we're looking for similar policy guidance for these clean energy or renewable energy projects and what to do when we have requests from the EAO office for input. And to help formulate that, because we only have the one meeting in June of the Policy and Governance Committee, we wanted to get ahead of it by sending out our survey, trying to find out the main areas that you want covered in the policy so that when we bring a policy forward in June, it has some of that detail in it already and we're not guessing. And so that's where the survey came from. So I'll pass it over to Colton and he can walk us through some of those results and then we'll wrap it up from there.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so there was a couple weeks in April where we had this open. We got 11 responses from the whole board. How many in here did it? Any show of hands? Probably more than that, but I figured it was mostly EA directors with the 11 responses. But yeah, again, Alex, we worded question 1 here on what should the TNRD involvement be in these EAO technical advisory meetings. Of course, the topic's a bit more broad than that, like Alex mentioned, not just the EAO, but so 5 of 11 of you who responded didn't have a preference for who attends, whether it's staff or the board. 3 of you said you want to attend in your elected official capacity. 2 others said it depends on the project. There was 1 other response. Somebody said both staff and elected officials should attend. Why? Question 2, do you want to attend these as a TNRD rep? Basically 8 out of 11 respondents said yes. 5 of those yeses were dependent on the project. With the energy referral project that comes forward, of course, they can vary pretty broadly from smaller wind or solar projects to large mines, obviously. Question 3, how should the board be informed of energy projects that are proposed on Crown land? 5 of 11 said a notice should be communicated to the board, not talking about email, but more of a public notice. I would think that would mean more of a memo to the board, for example, on an agenda. 4 of 11 said proponents should present to the board. I know depending on the project, that does happen from time to time already. 1 said email only is fine, i.e. information only. And 1 other response was that EA directors should be able to speak directly to the project proponent. Number 4, is it the province's job to provide sufficient public notice on these energy projects? As Alex has mentioned, we don't have the final sign off or say or jurisdiction really at all when you think about paramountcy overriding our local zoning bylaws. So essentially 10 of 11 responses were yes and 1 was not sure. Question 5, this was more of a question to get an understanding from you, the board, on what matters. This would particularly be helpful for the work on drafting updates to our policies, our energy referral policies for next month's policy meeting that Alex mentioned in his preamble there. 10 of 11 respondents said the most important concerns when an energy project is proposed in your area are the overall impact to residents, environmental impacts, and public engagement. I had equal pull on this here. Next on the list was community legacy benefits. Think of Trans Mountain, for example, of that. Site reclamation and waste management, jobs and tax impacts, impacts to ranchers on Crown land and license holders. Of the options listed in the question, power energy consumption was the least concerned about. Other responses, there were 2 of them there in the other section. Somebody said visual impacts and sightlines of a project. Somebody also said impact to the agricultural community, which is similar to the impacts to ranchers or Crown land license holders. And last question, we just asked you to put in some written responses. The comment, it's a little small, it might be hard to read in this. The top comment on the top left there was about being careful with staff attending these sessions, saying that staff could not reasonably attend them all. A comment below that area reps should be engaged and have a say in decision making, i.e. the energy project's overall outcome. Another comment that open houses should be held in the electoral area where the project is proposed. A delegation to the board would be preferred was another comment. Another one saying that board members don't need to be in all rooms, just the right rooms, smiley face. Another comment that proposals should not bypass the TNRD's public hearing processes as these projects should be evaluated with a long-term perspective. I mentioned the province's laws on paramountcy that override those. Another comment that EA directors attending these technical meetings would ensure that they're better informed, if nothing else. And then lastly, what does staff feel is the best way? So last but not least, and that leads off fairly well, into what our key takeaways are.
Thanks, Colton. Yeah, so again, a few key takeaways is the diversity of projects. When we say EO office, it could be solar, it could be wind, depending on the size. It could also be a major mine. So we understand that not all of these fit in the same category. The number of projects, we receive an awful lot of referrals, not just for clean energy, but all kinds of Crown referrals that the board doesn't see. And it's just handled at the staff level because we don't have jurisdiction on Crown land. So there really isn't much to share with the Crown. We remind them of OCP policies where they apply, things like that, but it's really high level. And then the varied phases of projects, the impacts on the information received and participation. So we're trying to get all this input that you've provided and see if we can create this policy that covers the things that you're trying to address. And then again, ultimately, the jurisdiction of the TNRD, we have to understand our limits here. And even the clean energy policy that we have now starts by acknowledging that we don't have the say on this, but that the board still feels strongly that there's certain things that should be communicated to the approving agency on behalf of our residents. So if I can break it up, part of the challenge with this is it doesn't fit neatly within one department or one person. There's, again, the advocacy side, and Mr. Kelly and the external relations can look at that. If we do go that approach, I think we need clear direction on what are we advocating for and how do we prioritize this advocacy? Because I think at the last EA directors meeting, we were here talking about some of those priorities, and this was not part of it at that time. On the policy side, in terms of land use, I'll be bringing forward, as I said, a revision to our clean energy policy to the June Policy and Governance Committee so that our planning staff know how to handle those responses and when it should go to the board. And related to that is the board correspondence piece. And Marnie, Mr. Jeremiah, and corporate officers working on that in terms of improving the system and how we share that communication with the board. So perhaps a portal system or some way for you to get that information early, even if there isn't a need for comment, so you're at least aware that it's happening. So there's the sharing for awareness, as well as does it go to the board for actual comment. So a lot of words there. It really is that convoluted, unfortunately. This process has changed by the province. I spoke to a couple neighboring regional districts who are dealing with this, and they're in the same position. They're not sure what the best way is. Again, depending on the size and the type of project, some don't even make it to the AO office. And in other cases now, it's the proponents reaching out to staff directly. So we're trying to make sense of the process and trying to formulate that policy for June. So I think I'll leave it there, open it to discussion and questions, and open to your comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Director Sal.
Thank you, Chair. Just sharing with our committee as one electoral area involved in a recent EAO process for the Taseko Yellowhead project. I'm very satisfied with the way that it's going. Initially, the EAO reached out to myself and Scott and Jamie, and we had a discussion. Do we need TNRD staff involved where it's not affecting TNRD services, which is offered to Vaven B or Area A. So at this point that, I'll just sit in on those calls and for this significant project, it hasn't been that time consuming. The proponents is holding open houses everywhere and holding regular phone calls with us. So I would imagine if it's a even smaller project, like a small wind or solar, then the time requirements for your elected officials involvement would even be lower. So just sharing that experience. Thank you.
Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate those comments. The proposal that is in my area is for a very large project, over 1,100 acres for the next 40 years. The proponent has been to our board and talked about it, but our board wasn't in a position to do anything much other than ask questions about it. And then all of a sudden it's being fast-tracked by the province. The consultation that took place with the EAO office on the call that I participated in was questioning whether or not an EAO, an environmental assessment, was even necessary. At the same time, where the proposal is being, where it's being proposed, there's tenure holders that haven't come to any terms with those tenure holders. And I think it's critical when we talk about rural areas. We're usually talking about one or two affected people, ranchers that have been in the business for, and particularly on that piece of Crown land, for decades, if not 100 years. And they're sort of being brushed aside. The premier is announcing this clean energy project. The power, I guess, is going somewhere into the grid to help, you know, the folks down in Vancouver and elsewhere, perhaps us, we don't know. And I think that we really have to have something rooted like the sand and gravel thing that asks the basic questions and ensures that at least we're saying, please consult with our people. So that would be the first thing that I would really like to see a policy developed under land use that ensures that that public consultation process is voiced by our staff, given to the EAO office so that they can incorporate that into their process. I would think that that's something that has been more or less proposed here, not under advocacy. We don't want to be dealing with this, but this is our policy. If you're coming into our area to propose these things, this is the kind of threshold conversation that we have to have. The second point that I would hold up is these projects, because they're 40 years long and because they're in your face, very large scale, the visual impact, I'll take credit for the visual comment, because if you land in, say, Palm Springs, you're expecting this beautiful desert environment, and it is populated with windmills spaced absolutely perfectly across the whole thing for miles and miles and miles. Your expectation of what you're about to see is completely displaced by this carpet bombing from windmills. So we are in a very scenic part. We have people that we're trying to encourage them to travel through our area, tourism, all the rest of it. So the visual impact when we're looking at mountains, but if we're seeing a uniform grid, that may not be the most appealing visual outcome. So I think that for us that have to live with it for 40 years, the folks in Victoria or Vancouver don't have to live with it, but our people have to live with it. I think that that's an important consideration for large-scale projects that might impact our ability to advance our tourism business in our area if we don't at least look at that aspect. So those are two things that I would hope we could develop some policy around. We're not trying to displace the staff from doing their planning stuff, but boy, we really want to make sure that we have at least one oar in the water on these large-scale projects that we'll be living with for 40 years. Thank you.
Just a question through to Alex. It's interesting, we've been working on our OCPs and we never ever thought about this particular item that's going to impact our communities. And I don't know if we have any information, even in our OCP, of the direction we should be going with the clean energy.
Through the chair, yeah, it's not that it hasn't come up. It's certainly been part of it. Again, it's the jurisdictional piece. So how much should our OCPs get into the use of Crown land? That's the challenge, but we also don't have OCPs in all areas. So that's why we typically go via board policy so that we have it for the entire region. And so, yes, ideally, this type of policy would be built into every single one of our OCPs, and maybe we'll get there at some point. But in the absence of OCPs everywhere, I think this is still the right approach. Yeah.
Thank you. Trish?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. I think the correspondence, because I have a feeling that sometimes staff get correspondence and they're dealing with something and we don't find out about it until later. And I know there's a lot of correspondence, but when it's something affecting the area, it would be really nice to have the heads up so that we're aware of something, so we don't have a situation like potentially what happened with Tonquah Lake. And I don't know if that was a correspondence thing, but finding out something at the last minute is extremely difficult if we know ahead of time and we can maybe talk to our residents, reach out, get their feel for things, that helps us with our job. The other thing, I really do think we need a policy of some sort for staff to be able to respond to these things. We're in a world where we're going to see more of these windmill projects. We're going to see more of these solar projects, and we have to find a way to balance what is going to be good economically as well as what is going to be good visually. There's got to be a balance there. It's going to be a bit of give and take, I think. But it would really be really helpful, A, if we had the policy, and B, if we had correspondence, at least forward to the electoral area in question. Thank you to Alex the other day. I think there was a situation where I saw something on an Ashcroft agenda. It's a couple months ago. And I'm going, well, that's an area so I reached out to you and you brought me up to speed. It's good to know that before somebody asks me a question and I'm going, what? So thank you.
Director Song.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director Grenier, for sharing your experience. So it sounds like, there's good examples of engagement, and then there's, cases where engagement has not been up to standard. Or maybe our policy would be to set specific actions and correspondences surrounding the good examples, such as I would like to say that the Seco Yellowhead project so far, open houses attended by proponents and the province, the EAO staff to be there. And, when should that engagement be triggered? You say Crown land, maybe we should set up a distance of the proposed projects. If it's 100 kilometers away from a electoral area hamlet like Vavenby or Birch Island, then I think the request from local residents for engagement would probably diminish a little compared to currently the mine being 22 kilometers up Forest Service Road from Vavenby. So a specific distance of the project on Crown land from the nearest EA settlements would be a good idea, I think. Maybe any other specific requirements, ideas from our committee members for the policy?
Director Grenier.
Well, just carrying on with that concept.
Sorry, Jill.
Carrying on with that concept, even if it's remote from a built-up residential area, often there's a tenure holder like a rancher. And in this particular application, the rancher's questioning, well, if you're going to put these solar panels up, are you going to be able to put them up high enough so that the cows can go underneath it? Or are you going to be displacing the grazing that has been taking place in this particular area for decades, if not 100 years? And, that proponent has come here in good faith, said, this is what we're proposing, this is how we're going about doing it. But it doesn't seem to me in this process that there's been a direct resolution, yes or no, we'll be able to raise the solar panels and the cows can go underneath it. And I'm not saying that that's the right answer. I'm just saying that basic discussion, we seem to be, it's like a pachinko machine. The ball is falling down to the bottom before anybody's actually done anything. And so we need, on behalf of our residents, because we're the voice for our local people, we have to make sure that we say to these authorities, you have to talk to our people. So that's the main goal. And then whatever is being proposed that this other agency is going to approve and we have to live with for 40 years, here are the things that we are particularly concerned about given the scale of the project, the duration of the project, the displacement of other activities on that site. And I think we have to say those things on behalf of our constituents in this other kind of process that we're not in charge of.
Director Hayward.
Pretty much what you said. I'm in the ranching community, so there's a lot of people who historically for hundreds of years have grazed on Crown land and grazed in areas that we basically call the country as such. They're hearing after the fact that the solar panels are coming, that this is going to happen. And it's great to say, oh, that's fine, the sheep can graze underneath the panels and all of this kind of stuff. They need to know that information long before it's passed and it goes to the final approval by the province, because in many instances, those animals will not graze comfortably under that situation. And if they can't go there, then you're putting farmers and ranchers out of business who are providing food to our province. So there's more involved than just who gets to do what where, because what we're dealing with is actually the grocery store for our province. And they're not looking at that. That's so sad, too bad. They'll find somewhere else to graze their cows. But I tell you, if that came to my range, I don't think my cows are going to walk around without knocking down over poles and being scared and not going up there. And if the rain comes on those panels, they're not going to go there because it's going to scare them away. So you're upsetting a project that's feeding the world. So I think it's something that somehow we have to say, take a deep breath and look seriously at this, please, Mr. Province, because it's not fair and it's not right.
Director Hahn?
I think the ones that have come forward to the board here, I think I've raised the question that everyone, what Director Grenier just mentioned and Director Hayward, I highly suggest you get a hold of British Columbia Cattlemen's Association, plus the license holder that has the grazing rights to the land you want to put these on at the start of your project. And I know in various instances, including I think up your way, Jim, they have done none of the above. They have not taken one bit of effort to go and say, how can we accommodate you, or we're going to displace you, or whatever. They have done none of that. And I think that is wrong. It should be somewhere that this should be done at the start of the project, like Director Hayward said. Thank you.
Scott, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just an idea that staff have been talking about for a couple of months now, and you'll probably see this at the out-of-town board meeting a little bit more about it. But we, kind of building on Director Thorpe's comments about wanting to make sure EAs are informed of some of these things. And Alex can jump in here, we probably get hundreds of referrals a year. And to kind of, and the way they come to us, sometimes it comes through administration's email at the front, sometimes it's blind copy to the director, sometimes it's not. So what we're going to do is create a portal where the entire board will have access to everything that comes in. Then you can go and look on a regular basis and be completely up to speed, because if we just miss one, because there's so many different ways that they come into the organization, we just want to have a kind of a common spot where every EA director will have access, or actually every director will have access to this portal. You can go see all correspondence for action, correspondence for information, and it'll all be there at your fingertips. So that's what we're going to be rolling out for next year, but we're going to show you kind of a sneak peek at what it looks like next month.
Director Thorpe?
Thank you. That sounds much better. Can I ask a favor, if it's not too difficult, that if it's something that's just general, it's in general, and if it's something specific to an electoral area, that it's, and so that we can very quickly scroll down instead of going through hundreds of.
Yeah, we're going to certainly organize it in a way that's much easier to toggle through. We'll make
Perfect.
it user-friendly for sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Director Grenier?
So just, I appreciate that initiative to keep the board informed, but that doesn't preclude the idea of creating a template to hand to these agencies, the EAO office or any other agency that comes along, say, this is our expectation. So I think what I heard from Alex was that you're looking for direction and what to direct these people to do and look at. So is it your plan to come back to this board or this committee with some recommendations on what that handout would be?
Through the chair. So you're right, there's the correspondence piece, and then there's the policy piece as to how we provide an answer each time. On that policy, the plan was to bring it to the Policy and Governance Committee next month. And it would incorporate the survey result input plus what I'm hearing today to try to formulate that policy. And then I think from Policy and Governance, it typically goes back to the board for a decision and discussion. Yeah.
Director Sal?
Thank you, Chair. So adding to Director Granier's, maybe we can add that tenure check. I'm not sure. Yeah, as part of that checklist. Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead,
Sorry,
Alex.
maybe I'll just add, and so that doesn't mean that we wait until it gets to the EAO process. Once we have that policy, if a proponent just comes to us very early saying, we're just looking to use Crown land, we might set up some test monitoring sites, then we can already hit them with this to say, before you even go any further, know that these will be the expectations on you. The limitation is we can't make them do it, but at least we can voice it every time, right from the beginning when they contact us to when they go through a Crown tenure process to if they get to an EAO process, it'll be consistent messaging throughout. And then there should be no excuse if they say we didn't know we should contact area residents.
Yeah, that sounds great. Any other discussion on this topic? Sorry, Jill.
I just
I
want
sit
to,
right beside
I
you.
know, you never look over here. My heart is broken. I just want to say bravo for that. I think that that's the way to go. Thank you very much, Alex.
Okay, there's no more discussion. We'll move on to the next topic, which is seismic. Oh yeah, the fact that we have problems with earthquakes in this area is now being included in our building code. Anyway, I guess we have a report for that.
Through the chair, yes, it's me again, joined by our Chief Building Inspector, Tony Bolton. So he'll help with some of the technical aspects here, but a lot of words on the screen, sorry, but it is a bit of a complicated one. So I'll take a step back. So in the 2024 building code, and last year, it was enacted that seismic and lateral stability requirements were added to the BC building code. And I understand that that change has had an impact on residents. Some may have reached out to elected officials. And so there was a question I was asked to bring this forward to just discuss what those changes are, what happened, what it's about, and to give you a bit of a background. So basically, building codes, so the national code and the provincial code, has a major update about every 5 or 6 years. So we're currently on the 2024 building code. Prior to that, it was the 2018 British Columbia building code. And the British Columbia Building Code is modeled after the National Building Code of Canada. So the feds create a national code, and then we adopt that provincially. We being the province adopts that. And once it's adopted by the province, every local government with a building authority and building bylaw is required to enforce that building code the way it's written. So there's no variances, there's no changes we get to make. We have to enforce what's in that code. The National Research Council made changes and recommended changes to the National Building Code for 2025, and they added a section that they called bracing to resist lateral loads due to wind and earthquake. Typically, the province of BC follows, so it waits for the national code to be adopted, then it incorporates those changes in the next iteration. What they did in this case, the province, is that they took the proposed changes that the feds had coming and adopted it before the National Building Code had it in. And what it did is it, in March 10th of last year, 2025, it applied what's called lateral bracing requirements across all of British Columbia. It used to only apply to the Lower Mainland, Vancouver Island, and it said now it's going to apply to the entirety of British Columbia. I should say it's not just about earthquakes. We talk about earthquakes, we talk about seismic, but it's also any lateral forces. So wind is the big one for our region. And what the province has said, and National Research Council, is that they're noticing two trends. One, they have updated data that's showing that there is higher likelihood of seismic activity in parts of Canada that maybe we hadn't thought of in the past. Two, increased winds and impacts of that in parts of Canada, combined with this trend of larger homes, bigger windows, open space, open concept. And so there's fear that those new types of buildings combined with more seismic activity and or more wind is causing potential instability in these types of buildings that they're seeing. So that was the logic they're using. Again, wind is the big one for us. We understand hasn't been major earthquakes here. That said, wind is a force here. And so it's called bracing for lateral loads, and that's to ensure that the structural resilience of the buildings is improved. That's the logic behind it. We cannot opt out of that. There is no simple opt out that we don't like that section, we want out. We could try to lobby the minister to see if we can get a special exemption, something like that. It hasn't been done. We've checked with some of our colleagues, and nobody's doing that. So there is no easy opt out of that section or any section of the code. There's other sections of the code that probably cause us more grief than this one. And unfortunately, we're forced to pass that on to the builder or homeowner. If I could just get somebody to click on the slide, please. Thank you. Oops. So what's required? Basically, any building permit requires what's called a bracing plan. So the two options are that the owner builder can follow the prescriptive requirements of the building code. So that means the building code has, we'll call it a recipe that you can follow, the exact specifications. You meet those specifications in the bracing plan, then you meet code for that section. So that means under that prescriptive compliance section, it means more rigid wall assemblies, what they're calling braced wall bands, and use of accepted materials and fasteners that are intended to resist lateral loads. And so this dedicated bracing plan has to be submitted with every building permit, often drafted by designer, owner, builder. Again, if they're following the prescriptive code compliance section, then we just check that it meets all of those tables and formulas. The other route is to have a structural engineer involved. Now, some residents, some builders have a structural engineer involved anyway, say for a tall wall or higher point loads. So that same structural engineer will sign off on the bracing plan at the same time. Others hire engineers in general because they don't want to be limited by the prescriptive code requirements. They want a more unique design, and so they get an engineer on board. And that engineer basically takes on the liability by providing their seal. So there's the standard bracing plan, prescriptive code, or the engineering route. So what impacts are there? For one, home designs. Home designs are changing a little bit, and or you need more engineering or different wall assemblies to be able to meet, say, an open concept sort of design. Smaller homes are easier to achieve with just braced wall bands, and larger homes often need additional wall band lengths and more complicated design without getting into too much detail. We spoke to a local builder recently to kind of get an idea of what's the cost, like what's it doing to the cost of construction. It is increasing it. This individual told us it's about 1,000 to 10,000 depending on the complexity. Again, for a simple home, straight walls, no big windows, it might not be more than say $1,000. On a more complex build, a lot of windows where you're needing to get engineers involved and or needing more material, that can go up to 10,000 or more. And again, often these higher end homes have engineering involved anyway, but they're paying for that. It's raising the cost of construction. That's a fact. And I also want to bring up just the staff time that we're needing to spend more time on these more complicated plan reviews and or needing more inspections at some stages to check that these special fasteners, et cetera, have been installed. A lot of technical details, but happy to take questions. Wanted to give an overview. Basically, it came in March of last year. Of the complaints we received, that's actually not in our top 10 list right now, to be fair. The builders who knew this was coming know it's not local government who brought it in. The the Canadian Home Builders Association is pushing hard for changes. We sit on that committee as well, and Tony does. And so there's a lot of discussion about this. We've heard recently that the National Building Code, and again, they were the ones who brought this up, then the province of BC adopted it. The feds have now tuned it back a little bit. They're changing it. And so there's pressure on the province to go and align again with national code and to simplify this a little bit, but there's still going to be more requirements than there were in the 2018 code. So hopefully that provides a bit of background, but happy to take questions. Go ahead, Brad.
Thank you for that report. You provided a lot of clarity today. There's probably no reason to read out what the notes I've put down, but thank you very much for clarifying that. That's something I can take back to the contractors I've talked to.
Just a question, Alex. Does Vancouver have a different, do they have a power over their building code compared to the rest of the province with their special?
Yeah, the city of Vancouver has a separate
Yeah.
building code, just like they have their own. They don't have to follow the Local Government Act. There's a Vancouver charter as well. So
Yeah, I wonder how we get that.
Well, we've talked about lobbying, and that was one of the advocacy pieces as well. Was I've mentioned before, the code is getting more onerous, not just in this aspect, in all kinds of aspects. Energy efficiency, it's going through the roof, and we've often talked about, and the board has mentioned, can there be call it a simplified code for rural areas or something? Because on one hand, we hear housing is going, there's no housing availability, housing's too expensive, and yet every 2 to 3 years, the code gets more onerous. It's really putting pressure on the cost of construction. And in many cases, it's for the right reasons, but there are certain elements, energy efficiency, that's not necessarily life and safety. We're moving away from the core principles of building code. At least this lateral stuff is back to structural integrity of buildings, not just energy. Not to say energy is not important. It's the cumulative impact of all these changes. And I think, Tony, you'll agree as well, when you meet with the Canadian home builders, nobody's saying building code is not important. All the builders say it is. It's the too many changes too quickly. Even if this was phased out through a 10 or 15-year process, rather than every 4 years you get bombarded with a new major requirement, it's too much too quickly for the market to digest. So hopefully there's at least a pause now in code changes, so we can catch up and digest what we're dealing with now before they add on even more.
And just an interesting fact, I started building houses for resale in the late 60s. And I look at the houses and how we built them then. There was none of the clips, all the metal that goes in them now. To attach a rafter, it was 3 3-inch nails, and that was it. And all those houses, they've been there since the 60s. They're all still there. The wind hasn't blown them over, and not even an earthquake. And those were affordable houses. And now when you look at the requirements that go in for a new construction, there's no way we're ever going to build affordable housing with all the requirements. I don't know how you get away with it. Around it, it might be the modular construction that is actually done on off-site, so that might be a solution, but who knows? It's so complicated now.
Thank you, Chair. I got 2 questions. One is liability around advocacy about opting out of items in the code. Is that a risk to us if we advocate for,
I don't know if the advocacy part is the liability. I think, first, I don't know that we'll be successful. We can advocate and push for the fact that maybe the code's moving too quickly and they should rethink parts, but I don't think opting out or pushing to opt out is going to be an approach. And the province is not going to allow local government just to opt out because we want to. That would put liability on us, I think. They will say, prove why you don't need to meet this. So we would have to come up with some kind of evidence that there aren't lateral forces here if we're just picking on this element. Advocating to opt out, I think, is not a good use of time, because I don't think that'll be successful. Advocating in general that we're concerned by this increasing regulation and the cost on housing, that might be a good message so that they slow down on the number of changes. But opting out, I really don't think is worth our time, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you. And second is, what is the top 10 complaints from builders? If it's possible to share, so that I believe it's allows us to build for SILGA and UBCM resolutions, if that's possible to share. Yeah, thank you.
Off the top of my head, maybe not 10, but maybe bigger themes again is not one element of code. It's too many elements of code coming too quickly. So continual changes. Energy efficiency, I think, is partly one, especially in a rural area where we have this requirement for continual heat recovery, kind of ventilation, especially in areas where you might not have power. And yet the code hasn't thought of that because the code assumes, again, the code is the same in Surrey as it is in Venables Valley or in another part of rural TNRD. So the question of, again, energy efficiency, simply because it's not a safety matter. Costs are always on the list, cost of construction, which we can't control through code, but that's still a complaint to the building department. Tony, any other thoughts?
Speed of process.
Speed of processing, yeah, of course, that's the part we can control, is how long is it taking us to get permits out? We're still at 4 to 6 weeks. But you can imagine, we've been telling people it's 4 to 6 weeks for, let's call it 20 years. We have the same number of staff, maybe even fewer than say 20 years ago. And yet the simple bills that Director Chair Laird had mentioned, those don't come in anymore. So now every building permit is this thick with complicated design drawings, not complaining on staff's job, but it takes a lot of time for staff to go through those. And so it adds to our cost, which is why I also brought to the board recommendations for changes to our fees, and we've upped those, and that was a good thing. But again, this all reflects the extra time that we're spending and the cost of that. So yeah, so the timing of permits is another big one. Off the top of our head, I'll maybe leave it at that, but yeah.
Thank you. Rob, you got a question?
I'm going to excuse myself.
Okay, we'll see you this afternoon. Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. 30 years ago, I built a post and beam house, big old post and beam house, big areas. How that thing is built like a brick, you've heard it. Didn't consider at all the wind. The house was prefabricated in Ontario, shipped in 3 tractor trailer loads here and assembled by a local builder. Part of what was the construction was the SIP panels, the structural insulated panels for the roof. First big wind, and we get big winds coming off of Kamloops Lake, 90-kilometer-hour winds. You can hear in the SIP panel the insulation vibrating inside the panel. You can look at these big, beautiful windows, and you can see them bowing like this because of the wind. Those are not things that I had thought about 30 years ago, and a lot of people building these big timber frame homes are not contemplating that that's a problem. So it may not be seismic in our area, but it's certainly the lateral loads of those winds. The things that I hear driving builders crazy are where codes are asking people to move to heat pump technology. Okay, that sounds great, energy efficiency, all the rest of it, except that heat pumps they basically shut down at around -15 to -25. Do we get temperatures below that? Yeah, so if you don't have a secondary backup energy source, you're hooped, your house goes cold. What's worse, if it's radiant floor heating and you're down there, all of a sudden you're now worried about your lines freezing in the concrete because that's not our area. So the argument that I hear from builders is that that code doesn't align with our area or that initiative. You add the step code, the 1, 2, 3, 4, which is piling on costs for energy and wall thicknesses and all the rest of it. That's what's driving people crazy. But on this particular thing about lateral loads, I think that it's a good thing for these large scale projects, not the smaller, less expensive homes that don't have these big open space concepts, but it's something that I think is probably constructive for some of the homes being built in our area.
And Trish, you have something to say?
Yep, always. Sorry. Alex, thank you for mentioning Venables. That is the one that I hear the most about is the the energy requirements, because we are rural and we are not Vancouver. And a lot of things that they have implemented, I understand why, but they don't always fit. And so that one size fits all, regarding this discussion around wind and seismic and stuff, actually, I think those are a good thing. Where I live, it's extremely windy and we are on a fault line. And how do we divide up this area, for example, the TNRD, and say, okay, North Thompson is this way, South Thompson is that way. So it's complicated. I personally think the house we have now is concrete. You don't hear anything when the wind blows. The house that we had prior to the fire, when the wind blew, the roof shook. So yeah, times have changed.
Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just add a couple last thoughts. I didn't mention, remember, we are enforcing minimum code. This is minimum. There are jurisdictions that have progressively decided to go higher energy efficiency, and they're pushing for that. So as bad as it is, we're still sticking to, we're not doing more than we have to, which is, I think, a good thing based on what we're hearing from folks. So in case there's comments that way, is there's other jurisdictions doing even more. And then the second point, I think a takeaway from today as well, is when there is a major code change like this, I'll try to bring those forward earlier so that the board knows it's coming, even though you don't have a say to change it per se, but at least you'll know that it's happening. And if your residents come to you, you'll have a better heads up. So we'll take that away.
Good, thank you. Any more discussion on earthquakes? Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, hey, just in Jim's area, there's a location called Little Big Bar Lake. And in that location, while I was an inspector, one of those roofs that had the three toenails of the roof trusses to the top plate, the double top plate, had that roof peel off twice during a windstorm that came off that mountain range up above and across that lake. And this house was done per minimum code, had since been rebuilt with hurricane ties holding everything together, and endured another windstorm that I guess it blew over RVs and the like too. So it's somewhat that it isn't one size fits all there. And if I could look forward, I'd say we don't have enough wind data to really reflect all the locations within the TNRD. We have what Environment Canada provided to the National Building Code, and that is just three communities. Lytton, I think, is one of them, and then Cache Creek. And so we have so much area that is not documented other than data we had historically. But if it's changing on an accelerated scale, we should probably be spending some money hiring Environment Canada to I guess, test and model what the wind forces are like now so that we can kind of apply these requirements properly, not using historical data that's now kind of long since been surpassed. So be looking at that in budgets for future, is to spend some money trying to get better climatic data for the region that is going to help those builders and engineers have the right data to source from. When you have no data, you go full conservative, and as an engineer, you prescribe the worst case scenario to protect yourself. And so to avoid that, I could see that coming in the future. Thanks.
Thanks. I know I've lived at Nicola Lake for almost 20 years, and I've never had such strong winds as we had this spring. The wind gusting is obviously increasing in my area, and I think Herb's had an interesting wind event, but it is definitely changing with the wind, and so thanks for that. Any other questions on the seismic? Okay. Next on the agenda is the Advisory Planning Commission, and I think Alex is going to talk to us about that.
Thank you, Chair. Me again. You're probably getting tired of hearing from me, but This is just a quick update. So as you recall, in March of 2024, so it's been a little over 2 years, the board reestablished an advisory planning commission. So this is a group of area residents. They're appointed by the board and they review certain land use applications like rezoning applications. And they make recommendations to the board and to staff as we prepare our reports for the board. So it gives that grassroots input. 12 members were appointed in 2024, and recently we've had 3 members step down for personal and health reasons. So we've wished them all the best and thank them for their time on our committee. Overall, the group's been functioning well, and it can continue to function with the fewer members. But I did want to bring it up to the A director's attention, especially because the members who stepped down were representing areas P, L, and M. So when we first set this up, we actually sent out 2 rounds of advertising to try to get interested parties. We were not successful the first time, and then in the second time, we actually brought it back to the board. You amended the EPC bylaw so that we could have a range of members. If we didn't have a member from every electoral area, we could still function on this committee. So what we're left with now is 1 member from area E, 2 members from area I, 1 member from area J, 2 members from area L, 1 member from area M, 1 member from area O, 1 member from area P. So there's 9 members left, representing 7 of the 10 EAs. Areas A, B, and N have nobody representing them on that committee. So again, the APC bylaw allows us to continue to function with that group. That term expires in 2 more years, so 2028. But the bylaw also states that the board may at their discretion appoint a new member for the balance of the term if there is a vacancy. So that's why I wanted to bring it forward. Again, the group functions. I'm happy to continue to work with 9. But if you feel that your area is underrepresented, then please let us know and we can do another round of call out to see if somebody would sit on the committee. It gets more tricky now because then we'd be calling for committee members from a certain area only. Not saying we couldn't do it, but it might not be as easy as recruiting new in when this term is up. So just sharing that and open to your input and feedback.
Go ahead, Lee.
Thank you. Just one question on that has rumbled around in my my weak brain, and that is per capita on these appointed roles, essentially. So where you have an area that has 6,000 plus folks, do you in fact, and area P is the good example on that one, do you in fact need 2 representatives because of the breadth of the landscape that we're asking them to be involved in? That is my only question, actually.
To the chair, no, I mean, that's exactly the question that I'm kind of asking. In terms of how it operates, no. And the reason I say no is because when these residents come here and they volunteer their time, they're wonderful. They're not there wearing the area P hat, if that makes sense. Like they don't know, I mean, they know area P, but they're not geographically tied. So they might be looking at an application in area E, but they know it's near a lake and they happen to live at, call it Paul Lake, Pinnatown Lake, whatever it is. And so they share their grassroots comments as a rural property owner in the TNRD as opposed to just their feelings for their neighborhood, if that makes sense. So I still think there's a lot of value. It's not that we're not getting good input, and not each of them don't only provide comment for their area. They're providing comments in general about how they would feel if this development was in their neighborhood. So operationally, it's not necessary, but if you felt like there's underrepresentation or you would want more of a voice for your electoral area, then sure, then we could try to find. So you're right, the bylaw does say ideally there'd be 2 appointees from area P based on population, and we only have the 1 for area P currently.
Director Tsao.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, if no other committee members disagree, I would like Area A to have an advertisement to bring in a member from Area A. Thank you.
Do you have anybody in mind? Yeah, okay, thank you.
I as well would like one, and I do have someone in mind that might be interested in joining the committee. Thank you.
Any other discussion? That's great. We'll move on to the next item. It's for committee discussion. And the first one is industrial water rate increases. I don't know if I had somebody speak to that. Yeah, go ahead. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I can take all these on and then just direct it to the appropriate staff member. We've talked about it internally and kind of went through this list of discussion requests. So starting with industrial wastewater increase, this topic is certainly a provincial jurisdiction, as we all probably know. And our options would address, our only option would be to address this through advocacy. The board's recently kind of given their direction on what our core advocacy topics are for 2026. So I don't know how urgent this is to this committee, but it would need to come back to the board, and then we need to push through the province to find out how that changed, because I think that was a pretty hot topic at Silga when that came up. And I think Director Onslow was kind of talking a little bit about it, and this may be her idea, and it makes a lot of sense. I'm just not sure how we tackle it, because again, it's not our jurisdiction, and it would need to be kind of an advocacy thing. So if that's what you'd like to do, just please let us know.
Thank you for that. I brought this one up because it was a hot topic at Silga, and when we had the electoral area roundtable discussion, Minister Anderson said it would be very beneficial to have municipal or regional districts sending in letters of support for a water rate increase. So I think that the timing is right. And in that discussion, it was coming up with the additional funds that the province could raise. And I know that the Fraser Basin Council wants them to have an endowment fund to protect watersheds. But I said, what if even a portion of that were to go into the small water systems? And that's when she suggested that we start advocating for this.
So I totally agree with you. So maybe what we would need is just a motion from this committee to go to the board to have a further discussion, and to, add that to our advocacy for the balance of the year. And I'm sure that'll be then something that the new board will take on in the next term as well. So if you'd like to make something to that effect, we can take it up to the board.
So I'd like to make a motion that we bring up the advocacy on industrial water rate increases to our board for discussion.
Motion's carried. I have an interesting comment. The city of Merritt, before we got water meters, we had unlimited use of water, especially it didn't matter where. So the first thing that we put in was commercial use of water, and we put meters on all the actually downtown businesses. We had a business in the middle of town that ran a swamp cooler for cooling, and the water ran through the swamp cooler and into the sewer, and it ran like that. We don't know how many years. It finally got stopped when we put in water meters. So water meters are a big way of controlling water use, and it also gives you the ability to have different rates of cost of using water. And when they found out how much it cost to run the swamp cooler disappeared really quick. So those are just sort of things that happen that most people don't think of how important water meters are, is to conserve consumption, and plus it gives the ability for the different classes to pay accordingly. So that's just an experience I've had. Director Houghton.
If it's okay, Chair, I want to step out for the remainder of the meeting. I got another meeting I have to go to. I'll be back for 1:30. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Doug.
I can move on to the next topic, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Great. So First Nations Memorandum of Understanding progress, and I'll pass that over to Mr. Kelly for an update.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, and thank you through to the committee.
a few kind of high level updates regarding relationship building and specifically memorandums of understanding with local Indigenous communities. So the first being that currently we're in discussion with Whispering Pines Clinton Indian Band regarding what an MOU could look like between our two governments. We do have a community to community forum coming up with them at the end of the month. That's kind of a preamble to negotiating an MOU and having those more fulsome discussions at a staff level about what that would look like once we get direction from elected leaders from both tables. So currently, Whispering Pines is the only community that we're in discussion with for a new MOU. Of course, we have the 4 that we've signed over the last 3 years. Those relationships continue to progress. It's probably no surprise to anyone at this table that the political climate is shifting around reconciliation, specifically DRIPA with the provincial government, and there's added capacity issues and more being asked of Indigenous communities from the provincial government when it comes to the issue of DRIPA, specifically wanting to amend and update that legislation. So there's a challenge there in terms of, we recognize that communities that we deal with are having capacity issues because more is being asked of them from the province. And so we aren't having as many conversations around MOUs and around relationship building with new communities, certainly this year. I think it's important to also recognize that there are more things that are now being asked of the regional district that we perhaps hadn't considered in the past. In terms of what's actually within our scope, what's out of our scope. And so that's an ongoing conversation that we're having with many communities about what actually is within the TNRD's scope of responsibilities via the Local Government Act and the Community Charter. I will just finish off by saying that, regardless of what the province decides to do regarding the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the legislation surrounding that, I think the TNRD is a very good example of what positive working relationships with communities can do. And we're doing this work because we recognize the importance of having good relationships with Indigenous communities, not because of provincial legislation and what the provincial government decides to do, but because it's right for the region, and it's something that this board has directed staff to do. So I'll stop there, and if there's any questions.
Director Thorpe?
Okay, so I'm a little curious, and I'm not sure if this is the place. So Skitchison, we were talking to them, and I know that Bonaparte and some of the other nations have been really keen to work on a memorandum of understanding. Where has all that gone if the only one we're talking to is Whispering Pines right now?
Yeah, thank you, and through the chair. So often and I don't want to say what happens necessarily, but what we've found is that we will have very positive conversations the way that we have with Skitchison, and we have a working relationship with them at a staff level. Bonaparte would be another good example of where there's been quite positive discussions. But for myself, and the approach that I've taken is that I'm not going to try to push overly hard to try to get an MOU if the conversations have started, but if the nation has other commitments and other projects that are taking priority over what an MOU would do with the regional district, then the ball is in their court, so to speak, and we will occasionally follow up, certainly with Skitchison and Bonaparte and other communities, and we know that a number of other Secwepemc communities, often referred to as the Lakes Division, so Squilax and Adams Lake, through the MOU with Nisconlith. There is some interest there for an MOU with those two communities, or a joint MOU with multiple communities. But we, as the regional district, are not going to keep pushing them and emailing them and phoning them and trying to get something if it's not a priority for them. So those conversations have happened, certainly with Skitchison and others. But if it's not a priority for them, if there's bigger projects that they have coming up, we don't want to, damage the relationship by trying to get something that wouldn't necessarily be a priority for them at this moment.
No supplemental. I know at least one of the bands I've mentioned have reached out to me numerous times and I've referred them to you. They are, from what I understand, keen on a memorandum of understanding. So I'm really confused. I apologize, but I don't understand why that conversation isn't ongoing, having spoken with the chief,
Which band?
Bonaparte.
Yeah, and so, and I know there's other priorities that we're working with through Bonaparte now, and that's kind of fallen off. So to Mr. Kelly's point, we can't make them do that,
Oh,
but we
no,
are still
it's-
consistently talking
I'm
to
just
them. And
confused because they've reached out to me for a number of years now saying, hey, what's happening with, are we going to get a member under understanding? I've referred staff to staff and I'm hearing that there's not a discussion going on.
no,
from
we're
what I
certainly
gather.
talking to them on a weekly
But not
basis.
about the memorandum of understanding, just about some of the other issues.
Yeah, that would take chief and council to direct that to staff, because that's not the message we're hearing from staff. It's like a staff to staff level.
Like I said, it's been going elected official to elected official, and then I've referred it, and then it's.
Yeah, we continue to try.
If I may, also, Mr. Chair, through to Director Thorpe, the challenge I think often that we have is that Chief and Council will be very excited about the possibility of a memorandum of understanding with the regional district. The challenge then becomes is staff capacity, and to CAO Hildebrand's point is that there will be other projects that come up, some with the regional district, some without the regional district's involvement, that will need to take staff's priority. And so, certainly in the case of Bonaparte or Skeetchison, we have had those conversations, directed by elected leadership, whether it's chief and council or our board or directors, to say, these are the conversations we've had. They're interested in an MOU. We obviously follow up on that, try to engage in those conversations. But again, if the community, if the nation has bigger priorities that need to take their staff's capacity away from negotiating an MOU, then that's up to the nation to decide, and we can't change that.
I just have a question is in MOUs, is there something else we could be doing to engage with our local bands? Memorandum of understanding can be quite onerous. Maybe we need to look at just having a conversation with the different bands. I know in my area, I think there might be two of the bands that would be interested in sitting down and having a discussion about TNRD and the local band, how we could work better together with just a verbal discussion, and maybe we'd come up with some issues that are and basically work for both parties. I'm thinking around what's going on now, and it's obviously a provincial matter, and that's the basically taking deeded land and putting it into a reserve. That's a very provincial thing, but it could happen anywhere. Like, are we looking at having discussions to try and avoid that, or have discussions on what's important to the bands? We just assume that they want to be part of the TNRD, and most of the bands in my area are just they would just like information on what's happening and what's going on. So maybe we could do an information sheet and see if we get together and have something like that happen. Just a suggestion and maybe for some discussion.
Yeah, I can start with that, and then Mr. Kelly can jump in. That's precisely our strategy, is to have conversations first, and if they would like to go down the MOU discussion path, and that's the way we go. But we have many service agreements with First Nations all over the TNRD. We have conversations with First Nations every week. I guess our capacity is one person that's also doing advocacy tours and other advocacy work, and then the 25 First Nations. So we're doing our best. We're reaching out to them. There's lots of leads and conversations that are happening. It's not resulting in signed MOUs and pictures on the wall, but I know we're making good progress. But if there's other comments or discussion, I'd be open to that.
Director Song.
Thank you, Chair. And Mr. Kelly is aware we were at this SIMP C2C in Valemont. I understand this year was the municipality that hosted it. Previous year was in Chuchua. So I was wondering if, again, yeah, relaying the capacity, it sounds like there's probably not, but an idea would be like a TNRD hosted C2C maybe down the road. I found that C2C was really good for dialogue with the First Nation. Yeah, thank you.
Actually, that was part of the discussion in Valemont, and the hope is to have it in Area B perhaps in the next time around.
Director Morris, you have a question?
But just a similar comment is just we're in this phase right now of some closing up in a sense in the next few months in terms of relationships as well and maintaining those and then the continuity going forward. So for example, for me, Adams, Squilax, keep working on that one, the Sconlith. So your sense is still that we're taking that lower level path in terms of those conversations. You're comfortable with those occurring, EA director to each of those, and hopefully with your guidance as well. That's the only thing that I'm sort of just making sure that we're still on that same track, or if there is a track that changes, obviously you'll be in touch with this as well. But I just want to make sure we're following along that same journey right now.
Yeah, thank you through the chair to Director Morris. Absolutely, and the relationships that you all have as elected officials with elected leaders of different communities is paramount and incredibly valuable. The conversations that we have at staff levels, to CEO Hildebrand's point, are often project specific, and whether that's emergency management or or emergency preparedness or municipal type service agreements, or all these different kind of operational things that we often have conversations about are ongoing. But the conversations as elected leadership to elected leadership is also important to kind of maintain and ensure that the first time that you're meeting chief and council isn't when we get down the road to sign an MOU.
Any other discussion?
Okay, to follow up on that then, I know we're getting close to the end of some terms, but what about at the start of next term that would make a concerted effort for to set up a meeting, whether, a lunch or whatever, with elected officials from TNRD and relevant band, so that we could actually get to know each other, so that we can reach out when something happens. Maybe I shouldn't, I wasn't being clear. I don't think we need to have every memorandum of understanding signed, but I think we need to really work on that building relationship, and maybe having a lunch or having a dinner together with chief and council and maybe the relevant electoral area and a couple of staff would go a long way to building those relationships. And if we started it at the beginning of next term, that might be something that would be beneficial for the next 4 years to whoever is sitting around this table.
We can certainly bring that back to the board and kind of figure out what our strategic plan is going to look like. And that's something we'd for sure consider.
Great, thank you. Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is related, but we have a land acknowledgement that we say it at the beginning of every meeting. And when we were at Silga, we heard from Don Lidstone that encouraged local governments to engage with First Nations governments, find some sort of a relationship. But we also are hearing that words matter. And I'm just wondering, when I read our land acknowledgement, that land acknowledgement was crafted by somebody and has been adopted in our agenda for some time. I think maybe in the current context, we should check with somebody like a Don Lidstone to see that it is achieving what we wanted to achieve, and whether it's maybe it's fitting with the times or not, should be adjusted or not. I'm just wondering, or our own legal counsel for that matter.
I can take that one. So our current land acknowledgements was developed by this board, and it went around and around, and that's what we came up with, and the board approved it, and that's why it's on the agenda. I think that conversation started when we were doing strategic planning back at the beginning of the term, but it's certainly something that can be brought up as a notice of motion or a new business item for the board to reconsider that, or at least get ready to plan for that for the next term. So yeah, just certainly open to that and connecting with the appropriate people to make sure that we're aligned. Makes sense.
Just supplemental to that.
Yeah,
Just
go ahead.
when I look at that, some of the topics that have come up in discussions at Silga and elsewhere are talking about, first Aboriginal title versus fee simple title. So we use words in our acknowledgement, unceded ancestral lands. Well, certainly I don't think there's any doubt there's ancestral lands, but what does the word unceded mean relative to the TNRD making that acknowledgement? Does that mean, that's an issue that has now come up, is a matter of the court decisions of the Cowichan and elsewhere. When I look at this land acknowledgement, does that import anything, or is it just a local government trying to find a nice way to say, we'd like to discuss things with our Indigenous people? I think that kind of reflection in today's context is a useful thing, not a grand exercise. I'm just thinking if this is onside still, then carry on. But if there are tweaks to it as a result of some of the Cowichan decisions and other things, then I think we should update our acknowledgements to be reflective of that, if you think that's appropriate. So
I would agree through the chair. I would agree with your comments, and I think bringing that to the next board makes sense versus trying to change it months before the election. But at the same time, I think we'll add it to the orientation, make sure we get good feedback, and adjust accordingly.
Yeah, I just have a comment. Right now, our orientation just acknowledges the Kamloops area. It's not registering the whole of the regional district. The land that we're established with our TNRD building is in basically Kamloops area, but we're in all of the TNRD. So we're very specific on the land acknowledgement and to the basic natives that we're recognizing, but we don't recognize all of the natives in the TNRD. So I think that'd be a worthwhile exercise to look at what we say at every meeting and make sure it's inclusive. I think we can get the wording right if we spend some time working at it, but I think that's a great idea.
I know if I could just add to your comments, that's something that we did take, that was part of the collaboration we did, and we got direct feedback from many First Nations that where your home office and base is where you acknowledge. So when we were out of town board meeting up in Clinton, we made sure the acknowledgement reflected where we were. So that's been the advice that we've gotten from First Nations all the way through. So wherever we are having a meeting is where you would acknowledge that traditional territory. But that again will be part of the discussion with the board and make sure that we do it properly.
Great. Any other discussion? Okay. Does everybody want to take a 10-minute break? Probably be a good idea. Then we'll get back.
Thanks.
Guess Jim will catch up when when he comes back in.
Sure.
So the next one is the BC assessment pipeline valuation that was brought up by Lee.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Mr. Austin Potts is going to take us through what we know and what we don't know.
Thanks, Scott, through the chair to the committee. To be honest, we don't know much. We knew from last year that they tried to push through this change. They stopped it due to a lot of outcry and advocacy that was done, which we're very happy that they have deferred that change, but they made it quite clear that it was only a deferral. When they've came in to talk to us or when they had private conversations with us, they alluded to the fact that there may be some railway reassessments that could offset the difference, but we got no exact numbers from anybody. We don't know if the change is going to be as substantial. We don't know if it's going to offset the difference. We did get a taste of what the pipeline assessment did to the assessment split last year, so we kind of know how big that impact will be. It would have to be quite substantial on the railway side to offset the full amount of that impact, but we don't know when that's coming through. Based on what they told us last year, it's likely that we will see at least some of that this year when the assessments come out, but I won't be able to tell you any more until I see the initial roll file that comes out later this year. Similarly to what we did last year, though, as soon as I see that roll file come out, we'll bring our report to the board with an estimated scope of the impact and a comparison to last year, so we can see specifically within those two classes what has changed.
Go ahead, Lee.
Yep. Thank you for that. I more wanted to have this item discussed because I'm curious if the will of the committee would be to send another letter to the Minister of Finance, just again, reiterating the impacts that any decision they make will be felt very hard by our area. So that's what I wanted to discuss and see if that is something, or at UBCM, if we can set up a meeting and have some advocacy again around those impacts.
Yes, Scott.
Certainly, we can do that. If this committee would like to make a recommendation to the board can then decide what direction we want to take. But that seems like it's reasonable.
If I could just request in our recommendation that we include something to the effect of requesting information from BC Assessment on detailed breakdowns. One of the struggles that we had last year with actually doing a calculation of the impact is that they gave us very high level information and we had to ask them over and over and over again before they finally released what they called their proposed roll file. If they could just start with that proposed roll file, it would save us potentially weeks or months of hassling them to get the information. And that's what lets me do the full assessment for you so that you know what your impact is on your areas.
Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. In that vein, when we heard from BC Assessment, they were saying, oh, we had to rely on American data. We didn't have the data from these poor Canadian pipeline companies. So we had to extrapolate from that. So I think that part of the response is, could you please advise on the Canadian data for the Canadian pipelines? I would also point out that Enbridge, one of the pipelines that runs through the TNRD, 4 areas in the TNRD, very close to hitting all-time highs today. The 5-year high, it's 77.01 per share versus a low of 43.47. So the stock market is saying these pipeline companies are increasing in value. And we just know when BC Assessment goes about and looks at our houses and our constituent houses, they say, hey, housing market's increased or it's decreased. I think the market value, the market assessment, the stock market assessment of these pipeline assets is indicating that they're going up. The BC Assessment representative said that we didn't have access to Canadian data, that the pipeline companies hadn't shared that information with them. I think that the obligation is on BC Assessment to go to those Canadian companies, say, if you want an assessment reevaluation, give us the Canadian data on the support for that, not just rely on another country's data. So those were the deficiencies that I heard from the BC assessment. And I think we should be pushing these points in the letter when we ask them for that information.
I agree with you on all of that, actually. And I do want to make the motion, but now I'm curious if this would be something that we take to BC assessment versus the Minister of Finance.
What we'd have to do is make the recommendation coming from the EA directors meeting, going to the board, and then the board supporting it. So we just need to get the wording correct. That will, maybe Austin can help us with the wording that he requires to get the information.
Through the chair to the committee, the wording that I would specifically need to do this assessment is that BC assessment provide detailed assessment information by participant in each service. Beyond that, I'm not sure what specific wording we would want to include to BC assessment versus if we want to send a separate letter to the Minister of Finance. I would defer that decision over to corporate services, but that wording around the specific assessment values of all participants in the services is what I need.
Okay, can we get those put into a motion then for Director Grenier? Can you put that into words?
Give us the bloody data. No, that the TNRD request that BC assessment provide the data on pipeline assessments reflective of current market values and their methodology related to those values. That's a start.
And if we could just add to the end of that and just say matching the level of detail that is provided in the 2025 completed or revised assessment role, that would be sufficient.
I meant that too.
Could we have the motion read back? Make sure it's something we, thank you.
Quick. That's Mark.
So what I've been able to quickly type here. Because it's a recommendation to the board, it'll be that the Electoral Area Directors Committee recommend the board request BC assessment to provide detailed assessment information based on or reflective of current market values and methodology related to the valuations and that they match the level of detail provided in 2025.
I would just say add to that current Canadian market values. That would cover off both the stock assessment and then the lack of data, or at least we could push that.
The thing is, it's not just the EA directors areas, it also goes through numerous municipal boundaries. And they all need this, would like the same information, I think, for their own communities.
And I think it'll come out once we have the discussion with the board, but again, to really nail down that we are not in favor of any pipeline devaluation, period.
Great. So does everybody understand the motion and call the question? All in favor? Opposed? Great, thank you. I did read a bit of information, and with the current value of oil, that pipeline that they put through is, they say, is basically almost paid for itself in the last year or so, the amount of volume and the value of the product going through there now. New director orientation.
Sure, I can start this and I'll pass it over to Marty. So we have gathered a lot of information from the board, from the EA directors, as well as what they would like to see based on previous meetings we've had. We do have a regional orientation set up for November 6th. That'll include all the municipalities and their councils as well, including our EA directors. And then it's the 18th that we're going to have a TNRD specific one. And why it's a bit delayed is because it takes time for the municipalities to appoint who's going to be on the board and work through that process. And then we're also considering a committee of the whole sometime right after that because we then have to approve a provisional budget without this new board seeing anything ahead of time. So it's going to be very like it always is at the beginning of the term. It's going to be chaotic, but we'll do our best to kind of make sure we have the orientations kind of planned out. We have people coming in to help from a legal standpoint and a legislative standpoint to provide kind of good information to elected officials. And I'll maybe pass it over to Marnie just in case I missed anything or if there's any more we need to add.
Actually, I think you covered everything. The orientations will both be, the regional orientation will be more specific to the legal recommendations. And then the TNRD orientation is more providing information to directors about the TNRD as well as procedural items related to our board. Does anybody have any questions, or is there anything else we should add in here?
And the one thing that I've listened to, especially with the new directors, are we going to have a very good information sheet that can go out with people that are actually coming in and taking out papers to run as a director? Because most of the directors that came last year, I talked to Doug Houghton about his expectations as being a director, and he said, a couple hours a week. And we all know that's not it. So that was his impression of the director's job. And I think it's very important that if you're going to actually take the time and effort to run for being a director, you should know what your job entails. So if we have a good information sheet that goes out with each person that is planning on running, would be, I think, very effective.
So in 2022, we did have a candidate information session. So anybody interested in becoming an elected official would be able to attend this meeting, understand the role of a director, the time commitments. I think we had an EA director or a board member speak to the role of an elected official. So we do provide that. We do that via Zoom. We also have the information session in person. People are more than welcome to attend. We have a document that we put on our website as well that outlines the candidate information. In addition to that, Elections BC also provides some very detailed information for new candidates.
Could that not just go in a package when they come in and pick up? Do you still come and pick up paperwork, or is it just all online now?
It is online. We will have everything. We can have the nomination papers on our website. If somebody needs something printed out when they come in, we're happy to do that and assist. And the legislation has now changed for the submission of nomination papers. So we'll be addressing that on our website as well.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Director Grenier?
What was rolling through my mind is we put out a responsibility sheet for at budget time that says, here's what we do, here's what other provincial agencies do, federal agencies do. And that wasn't so apparent to me when I put my name in the ring. I thought we were here to solve the world's problems, not just the TNRD problems, but I've been corrected on that. And so I'm just wondering, in that candidate orientation, not after they get elected, but before they get elected, that they realize the scope of responsibilities here and what we do and what we don't do. And that might be useful for the next set of candidates, if you agree.
Yeah, it's certainly part of it. It's the document that's called Who Does What, and it's broken down by municipal, federal, provincial, all sorts of things. And so we'll make sure that that's communicated as well, just so people have an understanding. It's on our website. It has been for 4 years, so people have access to that as well.
Great. Any other discussion?
Okay, last but not least, is just the reserve funds, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Potts for a response to that in the upcoming Finance Committee meeting.
Thanks, Scott. Through to the committee. This one, I'm still working on it. It's something that I'm going to have ready for the next Finance Committee meeting. I believe it's in June. What I'll be bringing is just a comprehensive list of all of our reserves based on the services that they're attached to and how those are in alignment with the reserve policy. But it's not ready yet. I'm still working on that. I'll have it for you for that finance committee meeting.
Thank you. Any questions coming from the board? I just have a question. I can only go on the history of my area. And I didn't really get all this information until Carla actually broke out my reserve funds and also surplus funds. And I've had a couple of instances where, and it's nothing to do with this staff at all. It's been going on for years. I have a surplus in my municipal agreement with the City of Merritt and the Lower Nicola Band, and it's for basically it's a grant in lieu that we give every year. And for I don't know how many years, probably since it was put in, there was I think about $20,000 a year going into a reserve fund. And I now have $450,000 in that reserve fund, and it strictly can be spent on the recreation that the TNRD is paying for, coming from the municipality and the Lower Nicola Band. And like I say, I wouldn't have known that if Carla hadn't split all that out, where I could actually look at it and associate what the funds were being collecting for. And I mean, there's been a couple of incidents like that where it's I don't think you can collect reserve funds for grant and aid or for a service. It's usually around a capital and the capital that you might need down the road. So I would really like to make sure that those sort of things get cleared up in our upcoming budget. So we, like for instance, the $450,000, how is it going to be allocated and where is it going to, how are we going to actually give it back? It would be, there's enough money there to pay for a whole year of the cost of purchasing or paying for the service that we're buying. And you can't do that. And I realize that. So we have to come up with some sort of formula where you give out so many dollars a year until you draw the surplus down. And like I say, I think it's very key that we sort out that and find out exactly the shortages, just like we're going to get a report for the next financial meeting. I really appreciate that. And I hope it helps all the directors sort out what they're paying for and make sure it's all proper. Anyway, thanks for that information. That's great. Any other questions from the board? Thank you. Thanks for all that information, Scott, that you put together. It was very informative, and I think it worked well for all the directors. So now we get to do roundtable discussion. And Director Yusuf, being Electoral A, gets to go first.
Thank you, Chair.
Again.
What was that? In Area A, Wells Great Country, we had as mentioned earlier, we had this community conference with Simp First Nation, hosted by Village of Valemont this year. One key takeaway was the messaging about the Aboriginal title issue across the province from my local area's First Nation. And we know all the electeds from McBride all the way down to Barrier attended, and one of our consensus was that we would help SIMP amplify that message to make sure that our residents know facts from what's floating around on social media. So that was useful for our communities. I also started attending regular calls and events hosted by the Robson North Thompson Forestry Coalition that was formed through provincial grant funding to Simp Resource Group, or Simp First, the business arm for Simp First Nation. One of my thoughts is I wish I knew of them. Well, actually, they weren't formed 4 years ago, but I wish I knew of them earlier last year when it was formed, because a lot of our First Nations are engaged in economic development through their own ECDF programs, and us being on their territory undoubtedly benefit from that. And so I think by reaching out to your local First Nation and talking to them about collaborating on potential economic development projects together is a useful thing. For me, for Area A, I found that at the beginning of my term, one of the struggles I had was finding suitable organization that was doing ECDF. And so anyway, that's what's been going on in Area A. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Area L, how did you get in there being second? L's a long ways down the elephant. Anyway, it's great.
Okay, on to Area B. Same as Director Sau, I had attended the Robson North Thompson Forestry Coalition group, and it's really exciting for the North Thompson Valley and for Simp Resource Group. And I really hope that the group builds momentum and can be an economic driver in the forestry industry in the North Thompson Valley. Recently, there was the advocacy tour, and I'd like to thank Chair Roden, CAO Hildebrandt, and Mr. Kelly for going and advocating specifically around the tiny house warriors. The meeting, although we heard essentially the same from the province, which was a big circular discussion about why and how potentially they could remove the tiny house warriors, we didn't hear anything new. So there's still ongoing work, and there's been no decision about the group. We had a really lovely celebration of Becca Beaton, who is a 40-year TNRL library employee, and she retired. And so we had her retirement tea yesterday, and it was well attended throughout the community and just a great event. And then last but not least, Mike Wigley's Helicopter Skiing is trying to expand their business, and they have a new arm for summer summit vows. And so it's helicopter rides up and weddings that will be taking place in the Alpine, and then obviously the accommodation and stuff in Blue River. So I know for them to develop that business, it is essential that our community pass the upcoming referendum for the mosquito control. So there is a big push in the community. There's been a lot of conversation around that vote. So that's coming up in the near future. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, Director Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So sadly, we've already had several small forest fires in our area. But on a positive note, they were all actioned quite quickly, never really developed into a lot. The one in Chasm was the one that ended up the biggest at about 40 hectares, but BC Wildfire got on it right away and kind of put that to bed. I did have a conversation with the local BCWS rep, and she advised me that with the amount of boots they have on the ground, they've got over 1,200 people on the ground throughout BC right now in different groups of 2, 3, and 6, that they feel pretty confident that unless something catastrophic, and that could come, but she said she feels pretty confident that they can get at the fires earlier and deal with them quicker. So that's good news. I did attend a community safety meeting that was called by the residents of 70 Mile. Regarding the ongoing problem with the intersection at Highway 97 and North Bonaparte. There's still been reckless driving and close calls and all sorts of terrible stuff happening there. So the consensus of opinion is they still feel that even with the lower speed limit, that it's still too high. So they've, of course, asked me to start advocating again with MOT, which took me 2.5 years before to get it down to 90 and to get it to 70. And I have started down that road. I probably aren't going to get at it until next term if I'm around. But there is some definite examples all through the Highway 97 corridor where the speed limit is lower and with exactly the same or less conditions than we have at 70 miles. So I do have some ammunition, but I just don't think I'm going to have time
to get to it. In the meantime, I've talked to the RCMP in Clinton, and they've agreed to lend me a speed sign, radar operated speed sign that has to be manned by volunteers. So we're going to have that for 2 weeks, which is one of those ones that flashes if you're going 5 kilometers over the speed limit. And all of the volunteers that were at this meeting have agreed to man it for the 2-week period, just to kind of get a sense for if indeed the speed limit is being violated, because their perception is that it is. So, yeah, so that's kind of an ongoing issue at 70 Mile. And I'm looking forward to the C2C discussions with Whispering Pines on the 26th to kind of forward our intentions with MOU. They do have a new chief, and it's kind of interesting how discussions with the bands sort of change a little bit when their executive changes. And I think their executive or their chief and council is allowed to, it seems to me anyway, that they're allowed a little more latitude, and no matter what happened last year with the chief and council, it can be totally different. And I really get a sense that that the chief is really wanting to work with us. And so to Corbin's conversation about whether it is high or low on their priority list, and I agree that they are all undermanned and understaffed, and they're overwhelmed by all of this, especially now with the drip issues. So I think their intention is there, but whether they can get it done or not is but she's assured me that that this is top of mind with her and her council. So we'll be dealing with that on the 26th of this month. That's about it.
Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. So like Director Smith, there have been a number of small fires in my area. BC Wildfire has been able to deal with them fairly quickly, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you. I'd like to give a shout out to my community members when it comes to these small fires, because they're the boots on the ground, and they're the ones that are texting or phoning or saying, hey, there's something going on. What is it? And bringing awareness. And I know that we've had incidences where we know far before TNRD staff knows. So I'm grateful to having a community that is so cohesive and working together so well. One of the more recent fires was actually on the way back from Silga, and it was over near Oregon Jack on the east side of the river, sort of between the river and the mine area towards Logan Lake. And I got a call, I'm driving home, and somebody's texting me going, there's smoke. Do you know what's going on? And it was a member up in Venables. And I ended up standing on the side of the road talking with Chief Christine Walkham from Cook's Ferry, trying to compare pictures and figure out exactly where the fire was. So I'm very sad about the fires, but I'm very grateful for the collaboration that's happening around it. We had a train derailment, as most of you know, that was just a little bit to the north of Nikomin. Again, community members working and keeping everybody informed, and then finding the accurate information. I've started community collaboration meetings for the summer. I've got 4 of the 14 down last weekend. Really good input from people, and I'm sorry, staff, you're going to be getting a few emails. But working again, there's an issue with the road up Barnes Lake. I've got somebody that has now given me drone footage and the width of the road. Somebody else that has shown me pictures of where a truck went over, where there's this problem with the road. Somebody else that's offering to take me to see some illegal dump sites. So it's great, that engagement. I'm really, really grateful for that. Let me see. Tecumseh Fire Smart Collaborative, I sit on that. That's down in the Lytton area. They held Emergency Preparedness Expo on May 6th. Really, really well attended. It was all the emergency vehicles, emergency preparedness, people that suppliers for things like the WASP sprinklers or different systems that can help with fire protection. I was manning the front desk all day, so I didn't get to see the expo, so I'm a little sad about that, but everybody it was wonderful. I think we need to do more of these things around the area. Let's see. Ashcrofton Area Lions Club recently celebrated their 75th anniversary. Oh, that is a group that have done amazing work in the area. And I don't think there's anybody that they haven't touched in one way or another. The problem, I think, is as with most volunteer groups, I think they're starting to age out a little bit. They probably hate me for saying that, but I think their youngest members in their 50s. So we need, I think, as a community to figure out a way to engage our youth and encourage youth participation because they're our future. Let me see. Last Friday night, our MLA was in the area. So I took him for a walk on our train bridge because our Lytton ferry is due to go out to high water. So far it hasn't. But I wanted him to see what happens when the ferry goes out, what the community goes through, having to park on one side of the river, walk that train bridge, and then pick up a vehicle on the other, and to try and schlep supplies back and forth, including fuel for the vehicle that's on the west side. While we were walking the bridge, a train came by, and of course the whole bridge, it rattles and shakes. And I remember the MLA looking at me going, I hope this thing doesn't derail because it's going around a corner. But I think it was a really good chance for boots on the ground and him to see what community goes through. Let's see what else. I attended the Highway 8 reopening a couple of weeks ago. That was awesome. Indigenous communities have worked together really hard to get that corridor done. And it's a collaborative piece. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been invited to that and to see that. They're currently working on paving it, which is going to be awesome. I know that personally my husband's looking forward to it being paved so he can take his motorcycle on it safely. And I think that that's about it. Other than Jim, your roads. I know that when we were at Silga, you said something about having talked to ICBC and that there is a way that they can advocate. And I'm wondering if maybe you could expand on that, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, I have full. I did speak with ICBC at Silga, and I was somewhat aware that that they do get involved with traffic issues. I just wasn't aware as to how much. So I gave her the scenario that was happening at 70 Mile with the passing on the left and all that crazy stuff. So I've since emailed her kind of a detailed report as to what we talked about, and she's forwarded that on to their engineering department, who have indicated that there is some things that they can do over and above MOT, and that they actually don't even need MOT's approval to do it. So I don't know what it is so far. I'm waiting for his response. So there is some things that they seem to be able to do.
Great. Next is Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. I guess we'll go around the area J, the Lac Lejeune area, or the Trunk-Hill Valley Community Association. They're having their annual general meeting in June. The chair of that community association asked the Ministry of Transportation if we could have a follow-up meeting on the Trunk-Hill Chris Creek Road. The manager indicated that they wouldn't be prepared to do that until the fall. Of course, the problems with the road are right now. And I understand from a CAO Hildebrand that the Ministry of Transportation was about to present to the TNRD, but had to delay that. So it would be very useful to hear from the Ministry of Transportation if something like that could be rescheduled. And I was in Victoria last week. I think Chair Roden will download on our advocacy tour, but I did meet with MLA Dirkston about the road, and he was up for a new site visit. I'm up for a new site visit. So if we could encourage the Ministry of Transportation to do something before the fall, that would be good. Also up in the area, you might recall, we got from the school district what I guess I'll call the park site. On that site, a CCAN has been put for the wildfire response team, And the wildfire response team is now extended electrical to the CCAN so that they can work on that whole thing. So our efforts to stimulate this wildfire response thing is definitely having legs up in that area. Savinaw, I want to talk about the boat launch in Savinaw, and specifically, TNRD staff have inquired with the City of Kamloops staff and have received confirmation that there's no short or medium-term plans to add any more boat launches in Kamloops to access Kamloops Lake. And so what's happening with the fee structure and charges that Tobiano is charging to access their boat launch, it's really now falling on Savinaw's boat launch. And we have the upcoming season. And I guess I'm alerting you as directors that we have this growing problem because there's so many people trying to launch their boat in Savinaw. Anything we could do to alleviate that, a lot of these people coming from the Kamloops area. I don't think the Kamloops directors are yet aware of it. I would like to raise that issue with them so that they're aware of it. And perhaps if they think it's prudent to give direction to city staff to perhaps find a way to better utilize their boat launches. It's a water level issue for one thing, but trying to find some way to relieve the Savinaw boat launch so that there's not as much pressure on those people and so that they don't say, oh, we're closed to everybody from Kamloops. That would be an unpleasant outcome. So that's an emerging issue. Haven't yet heard, don't expect to hear for another couple months on the water treatment plant application for Savinaw. In Tobiano area, I guess, Mr. Vieira, we have ongoing discussions about a fire hall. We're going to have a fire hall referendum. I don't know I think we're getting pretty close to having that area identified for the fire hall. So maybe I'll just stop and ask Mr. Vieira if he's got an update for us.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. So we're going to actually bring a report to the board next meeting just to remind the board of this process that's ongoing and get them to give us direction to carry on with that consultation. The update from the land donation is we're very close to finalizing an agreement so we can take that forward publicly to consultation and notification around the plan and anticipate board direction to do a referendum to coincide with the election on October, whatever it is, October 17th. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And then moving from Tobiano to Cherry Creek, we have, I think I raised this the last time, we have a rural road that goes from pavement to gravel. And in that process, it's an elbow. So you literally have to go from the pavement up the gravel. This part is Ministry of Transportation. That part is Ministry of Transportation. The elbow isn't. And so I've been working with Mr. Kraus, who has been communicating with the Ministry of Transportation to see if we can do something to connect these things. These people access their houses from the gravel road, the top part. And everybody has now learned that this is not part of the ministry. We're trying to solve a problem. And I guess I might have to escalate this into a political environment if we can't yet get any resolution. So I'm asking Mr. Kraus perhaps if he could report on that issue.
Thank you through the chair. It's still status quo. I have raised it to Graham Schimpf. He's away or was away for about a month. So he just got back to me last week promising to set up a meeting and a call to talk about the elbow.
So again, Ministry of Transportation issues are front and center for Area J. Moving to Lac Lejeune, staff have received, I have received a call from the Water Users Association. I don't know the formal name, but they have asked if there was a possibility of the TNRD taking over their water system formally. And I guess there's the suggestion that meetings would be set up. There's obviously lots of conversation that has to take place in the context of small water utilities and all the rest of it. But perhaps, Mr. Vieira, if you could comment on next steps on that.
Thanks. Through the chair, I guess just to remind this committee that we already have a very clear policy around the process that we'd go through and what considerations would need to be met or aspects of a water system would need to be met before the board could even consider taking on a water system. So we've given that policy to this group that was inquiring about a process. And they've, from their side, just formally asked that we, or formally directed their own membership or executive to engage in conversations with us. So the next step was actually going to be for them to arrange a tour of the facility that we're including staff and yourself on, and just waiting for a date for that to happen.
And I guess the last point is the advocacy tour that took place last week. And I'll just simply say that, yes, we have no bananas is the answer we got from the province on finances, but we put some ideas for them to think about even in that context. And I'm sure Chair Roden will have more to say about that this afternoon. Thank you.
Director Houghton.
Back in action here. I'll report on a few things. In the Westwold area here a little while back, I think I might have briefly reported on it. I attended they call it a fire resiliency meeting put on by a TRU group, and they held it in the Westwold Community Hall for the Westwold residents. Basically, how do you handle post-fire trauma, I guess is the right word. And it was fairly well attended on the staff side of TRU. Quite a few residents came, and actually a lot of residents really spoke their mind on that fire that happened back then. Switching over to the Knutsford area, I attended the annual meeting of the Knutsford Initial Response Team, which is the first response team, I believe, to be set up in the province after the 2023 wildfires. I attended their annual meeting, and I'll be attending their fundraising banquet here, not this Saturday, but next Saturday up at Grandview Ski Acres. Last Saturday, I attended both Director Morris and I attended the Monty Creek spring annual, I guess, Monty Creek Fire Hall open house. Very well put on by staff of both Pritchard and Monty Creek. What I just want to say is in our work as directors on the TNRD, I'm really, knowing that this is our final year, I'm really proud of that facility and on how we put in some extra dollars out of our gas tax fund to make that Monty Creek Fire Hall a beautiful finished product that it is. The landscaping, the rock that was hauled into the asphalt, to the fire resiliency trees that are going to go in and around it. It's just a first-class hall. I'm very proud to be part of it. And I'll be attending the Pritchard, I imagine Director Morris will, Pritchard open house next weekend. I quickly attended a meeting in Victoria with a cohort of mine, Bob Miller, on another group that I'm associated with, Ownership Identification, the Brands Act, the Cattle Identification Act, and I was representing the BC Meats Council got a chance to have the Minister of Agriculture's ear. And after they got done their presentation, I gave her about a 30-second fill-in of our ag plastics recycling project we got going here. And she's very interested in it, wants to set up a Zoom meeting between us, her office and the environment office here in the near future. And Minister Popham will be attending next weekend, I believe it's next weekend, the BC Butcher Culinary Championships at TRU, which is the top butchers in British Columbia will be attending TRU for for the finals, and Minister Popham is coming for that on next Saturday. And we're going to have a bit of a barbecue at Cam Lakeview Meats on the Saturday or the Friday night prior to that. So other than that, I think that's a pretty well wrap up. I got a good news story on a road. One of our residents was proactive early in the year and wrote the Argo and asked them for, what are you going to do about the grading and dust control in Edith Lake Road. And Edith Lake is a highly traveled road to get to the fishing lake, and you go by all the residents along the way. And I got to say, I was up there last weekend, and they did an admirable job of grading and dust control, and I hope the dust control lasts. But anyhow, that's a wrap up in Ariel. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm next on the agenda, and we created a Guardians of Nicola Lake committee last year. It was put together very quickly, and I'm very impressed with this group. They have exceeded my expectations of an environmentally group. They have 2 newsletters out this year. Very interesting. It explains all the information on what's happening in the lake, who's involved. They're an excellent group to work with. They now have all the information on what's been happening in the lake, and they're working with 2 or 3 different. They work with Upper Nicola Band as well as a couple other sources for all their information. They now will be doing testing of water, I think 3 to 4 times a year, which hasn't been done before. And it's a well-functioning group. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do about what's happening in the lake because it's just the way all of the nutrients are in the lake and are moving around. And it has a lot to do with the volume of water that goes through. No spring runoff this year, very little. They'll be lucky if they fill the lake up. And so there's no flushing of the water out of the lake like that usually is when we have a good spring runoff. So, and that's about all I have to say. They're actually having their first meeting in July for membership. So if anybody wants to go down and hear about Nicola Lake, just give me a call and I'll give you the information. Thank you. Harry N.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of quite interesting things happening in Area N. I was just going to say they're all rosy, but there's 2 things that I'm quite excited about. One of them was the Brookmere project for turning the school into something the community can use is moving forward. We went out there and had a little visit with the folks and the school board. And secondly, the manager for the TNRD Filming Society showed up at my front door with about 10 people from a filmmaking organization looking for a hobby farm. And I told him, I have that farm. That's it.
Director Hayward.
Okay, I'm all over the map here. So I'm going to start to say that Highway 5 in the Lewis Creek Exlu area is a lot better as far as travelers on it. So our RCMP or someone has certainly made a difference. We are seeing less speeding and touch wood, far less accidents out there. So that's a positive. We also have seen the guys, is it CMFC or CMFV, the guys that kind of drive around checking out stuff, and they'll be sitting on the side of the road and you'll see a guy go by them at 9 million miles an hour. And by the time they get to Barrie, or the RCMP guys waiting for that car. So they're working really well together and we are seeing a difference. So I like to pass that along to Argo because it's well done for everybody who's got something to do with that. On roads, I've got many constituents complaining about the numerous potholes on washboarding and gravel roads, because we do have quite a few in my area. We know they get bad in the winter, but these folks complain pretty much all winter long about their roads. once all of the snow and all of the ice and everything had gone, then Argo came through and graded the road. And 2 days later, the potholes were back again. So they're cosmetically making it look pretty. So they have appeared, but they really haven't done anything to fix it. And it's getting worse and worse. One lady wrecked something in her car, hitting a pothole out there. And I've been getting lots of messages on it. So I haven't recently spoken to Argo. I don't mind doing that. I just thought I'd put that out there. Sorry, can't even read my own notes. This is getting bad. Anyway, constituents are squawking at me about gravel roads. So the recent rain we had has been wonderful because a lot of folks have been keeping an eye on their wells, and this will certainly help. Last fall, there were many wells that went dry. There were many little creeks and streams and small lakes up in the higher areas that dried up where cattle and things would normally be getting water from. So that was becoming a problem for folks who are in the ranching industry. We've come out of winter with water up there. It's good. The creeks are back and the little lakes are full. And we were getting pretty concerned until yesterday when the rain came, and that's a big plus. If we could get that once every couple of weeks, we'd be laughing. So hopefully that continues. The other great problem is if we don't get the rain, then the animals that are on summer range up in the mountains, pretty soon they have to come out of there because there's no water for them. So then that causes another problem for farmers who are trying to grow hay and stuff on the land that they have to put the cattle back on. So that's a concern. There was some concerns about cost factors for summer tourism coming through. And has it slowed down? The highway is quieter than it normally is. May, we're starting to get pretty busy and we're not seeing as many come through as we normally do. That could be for many different reasons though. So on another note here, just bear with me. There's still concerns about campfires being too large, unattended. I'm hearing from people who are, taking their dog for a walk in the bush and there's a campfire smoldering away and nobody's there. But the public is really getting very, I guess they're the best guards that can be out there. They're really watching and they're paying attention and they're putting them out when they see them. So not sure how we'll stop people from being that ignorant. I don't think that's possible, but we keep our fingers crossed. We've got many folks in our area working on fire smarting their properties. They're not doing it by calling the fire smart people in. They're just following the information that they're reading and that the TNRD is putting out. So I think that's really good. A couple of them said, oh, we fire smarted our property. And I said, oh, did you get a hold of TNRD? Oh, no, we just went on the website and read what we had to do and we did it. So that's a big positive. Barrier Library is going great guns. It's a beautiful library. Anybody who's never been there, if you drive through, please go in that little library. It's tremendous. And they're extremely excited that they started a parent-child mother goose program. That's for, I think, little kids up to 5 years old or something to come in with their parents and they sing songs and do all those kind of things. They're getting 15 kids at a time. And the library is about as big as this room here. So it's just great and the community loves it. So that's a big plus. Everybody's really happy with the Barrier Library. And what was my last thing to say to you guys? No, I think I just about got there. So other than that, for myself personally, I'm not getting a lot of negative phone calls and a lot of complaining. People seem to be pretty happy. So otherwise they're phoning you guys here. I don't know, but I'm not hearing a lot of complaints. The biggest complaint was the roads. That was the biggest one that I've had, and everything else seems to be pretty positive and people are looking after their properties.
Thank you. Director Morris.
I love being the end of the train.
You got 5 minutes. No.
Oh, cut it back.
Take all the time you need.
Do that. No worries. Just a few things, and maybe we'll try and get some humor into the midst of this. I went to a really cool wedding last week, but here's what is important about the wedding. The guy that was in charge of the wedding and everything is actually the head guy for WLRS. So the last 3.5 years, I have been trying to reach WLRS Crown land issues over on the Pritchard Bridge. And sure enough, there I am doing a wedding and the guy's the key person. So the good news is I have a new friend, which is good. Fire, yes. Potholes, yeah, potholes really quick. We've got all of those same things that the phone rings off the hook right at this time of year, certainly in those areas in Whitecroft, Upper Lewis Creek, all the way up through some of the other benchlands up above Pinnetan. All of that's going away again. So it's a constant battle. Argo's doing what they're doing, but what they're doing is probably not enough in a lot of locations. So we have to keep going on that. Fires, Dougie Delry did a great report, of course. We're really excited about the advent of that new fire hall and its capacity to basically provide us reach over the bridge onto the north side, which is the side that I'm on and Dougie's on the other side. But it's that's going to give us a lot of traction. On that odd note, yesterday, somebody started a fire underneath the Lafarge Bridge. So my property, obviously, I'm in full sight because beside me, it's the bridge. And somebody made a decision to light a fire underneath that bridge. And it was the Kamloops Fire Protection people that came to help us out of that situation. Probably the Lafarge people too, I don't know. So in other words, we're back into what I would clearly call silly season, and people not paying attention and doing the things that they need to do. I've mentioned that one, the new interest in any of you that are driving down the road on your way back towards, a little east of us there, take a look. They've done a fabulous job with that fire hall in particular. Doug, I know you're very, very proud of it, and I certainly am as well. On that note, as well, maybe it's the new fire hall, maybe it's just this time of year where people suddenly realize that we've lost the snow and oh my gosh, the fire might come. I've got interest now on Shuswap Road, significant again, on an east side that would carry us all the way down almost to the Pritchard sign area. And also in conversations with one of our good friends, mutual friends, on the west side of Lafarge Bridge, in terms of how we're going to cover off that stretch of road as well, because it clearly could conceivably be an egress route for us to get us out. So working on that kind of thing. A couple of other minor ones, I guess a project for me and myself and many of others as well, is around the fringe conversation. So the longer term picture being, in the case of, say for where I am on Shuswap Road, I'm technically fringe, as it were, but the impact that we're going to begin to see over the next decades, this is probably one large kind of conceptual issue. I think that whether I'm around or whether it's the next person, I think that'll be one of the next major projects for a TNRD representative to be looking for. That covers most of that. I did want to mention as well, again, at the end of the month, there is a celebration of life for somebody that was very, very active in TNRD Area P in particular. He was incredible in terms of the work that he was doing as a volunteer for FireSmart, in addition to being an incredible asset for myself and a lot of the understanding that I was getting as I took over from Mel Rothenberger. So there's going to be a bunch of us at the Halfway Creek Hall as well to celebrate that. So I don't think the word celebrate is the appropriate word, but in any case, on that note, look out for the potholes. That's my closing comment.
Thank you. Gee, we made it right at 12. Oh, Doug, Director Hahn.
Just to let you know, Argo's gonna receive a brand new 140 cat grader next month, so get a hold of them and get them to put it to work. It's Justin said it should be in operation mid-June, fully rigged out, and I just hope they got somebody to sit in the driver's seat, but that should help in the, covering the gravel road situation, hopefully better for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody. I want to thank the staff for all the information they supplied us with today that brought us up to speed on a lot of topics we were concerned about. And I adjourn the meeting.